welcome back everyone to another episode of Cinema D'Amore. I'm your host Chuck, joined by
Justin.
and we're continuing on in war.
What is it good for?
Nothing, I guess. That's what I've been told.
Absolutely nothing.
Moving on from the Thin Red Line to Black Hawk Down.
But you know who
Another
didn't move on?
big ensemble movie. Yeah, we didn't move on in a sense. I mean, war's still not good.
No, I was going to say
The
Hans
overall
Zimmer
message.
didn't move on. Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer's the composer for both
I
movies.
did have to look it up because I was trying to think while I was watching Black Hawk Down last night, I thought, and I didn't realize that he was the composer for both movies, but I was just sitting there and I was like, oh man, we didn't talk about Hans Zimmer did the music for Thin Red Line, and I think it's probably one of his best scores because it's not, and like I think now he gets kind of stuck with like the Nolan, like everything's so over the top and loud and way too much, and like I think I was almost surprised when I realized that he scored Thin Red Line because I was like, man, the soundtrack's like really subdued. It's not ridiculously overbearing the entire scene going on.
And this one's got everything.
Yeah. This
Black
one
Hawk Down,
has a
he's
lot
doing
of
like guitar solos. There's a little bit of synth in there.
This was the one I wondered. I was like, is this where it changed? Like, I mean, these movies are only like 8, 9 years apart between, or not actually less, because I think what 97 was in Red Line, so it's only like 5 years apart. I'm like, what did change? Like, when did he? This is the Hans Zimmer we know doing everything like a bit way too much.
I looked up his IMDb. There were a lot of things on there that weren't just a composer.
Yeah.
And it would be like the most random movies, and it'd be like he played the keyboards in this horror film, or he did this in this romance movie. It's just he's all over the map as far as music goes. So, and that's what this score actually feels like to me, because sometimes it's hard to tell what's going to be soundtrack and what's going to be Hans Zimmer.
Yeah. Again, I will say I do think this maybe has an even bigger and even, I don't even want to say weirder ensemble cast, but it has so many. It is every single character that turns around, and this, for a lot of them, this was like their early roles before they did their much bigger stuff. We get a reunion of two characters from Train Spotting.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's the common bond too. I'm like, there's so many characters. The Train Spotting is this movie's "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Yeah, it's in there. We get that connection. Tom Hardy's first role.
Thomas.
Orlando Bloom before Lord of the Rings really took off and blew up and made him more famous for that. Nikolai Coster-Waldau before Game of Thrones. Like, there's so many people in this
Way
movie.
Before. And before you, and the whole plot revolves around Orlando Bloom fucked up, and many people died because of it.
It's where it starts. He feels like he could be the main character of this movie, or like the co-lead with Josh Hartnett, and then very quickly gets knocked out of this movie.
He's the inciting incident. He's not character really at all.
Yeah, he doesn't get too much to do. But yeah,
I do. Favorite character, or well, I guess the one that was hardest to stomach for me was Jason Isaacs' American accent was
Isaacs.
so weird.
What was that name? Is that your Idris Elba? It's just Jason Isaacs.
Isaacs. You know what? I'm just starting to sip. I'm like,
I will say, I don't think anyone's American accent is very great in this movie. They are all going for Southern. Like, it's the most, and it's the thing that I've seen a lot of people talk about. Like, oh, how did you do an American accent, or like, where was your American accent? And they do. It feels like 90% of the time it's like, just go Southern, because you could go so broad with it, and people will just be like as much as I want to say, oh, that accent was terrible, I'm like, nah, I've heard people talk like that in the South. They do sound like that. It's not. It's a more exaggerated version of it, but he's not the only one. Like, Eric Bana's doing a real strong Southern accent. Like, it
almost feels like he's fighting his Australian accent.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, for this being a movie that is about the American Army for the most part, the Marines and the Army, the cast is, I almost want to say, at least half, if not almost more, either Australians, British, Scottish, Irish. Like, they're all, like I said, the guys from Train Spotting, Ewan McGregor and Ewan Bremer, Orlando Bloom, Tom Hardy, Eric Bana, Jason Isaacs. There's so many British people in this film. and British and Australian. So yeah, they're all doing very much just kind of generic Southern
If you
accents for
live in the
most of these characters.
Midwest or the South, like get into acting. We
Yeah,
need you.
yeah. It's sometimes it is surprising that not all these guys are American, but
This was
you know
very obvious that they weren't.
you had
It's like
I mean, then you had your real Americans like Tom Sizemore.
I figured you would like eat that up. That you would
He's
love Tom
he's
Sizemore.
such a ridiculous like he maybe is like the most I don't even want to say like cartoonish. He doesn't come off cartoonish, but he is very much like he is constantly framed as like no, Tom Sizemore's a badass. Like he'll walk through the fight while everyone else is ducking for cover and he just like straight up walks up to people and is like, "What the fuck are we doing here, man?"
Yeah, he made me think of that scene, probably because of the Humvees too, because he's like 90% of the time in a Humvee. Made me think of Generation Kill. Did you watch that?
No.
Oh, it's great. And there's a moment with trying to remember what Skarsgård.
Eric.
Eric
Oh wait, well
Skarsgård.
Vampire Eric. It's not his
Vampire
name.
Eric's in it. And they get they're going across the bridge and they get blocked and then there's all this enemy fire on them and he pops through the roof and he turns around like as gunfire is going past him and he's like, "Will you back the fuck up?" And it's just that's what Tom Sizemore is in this movie. He is that guy that just like he's oblivious to the warfare. Like I mean, he knows the warfare is going on, but his actions say differently.
But yeah, he's so yeah. This definitely falls into the category like we talked last time. Like almost all war movies are in some way anti-war movies. But this one is different from something like the Thin Red Line. That's kind of just the Thin Red Line's kind of just like kind of almost war in general is terrible and these are the consequences, but it doesn't necessarily get into specifics. This one's very much the specifics of they went in just completely unprepared for this
Yeah.
operation. They thought that this was just going to be the easiest thing in the world. They're in Somalia trying to take down a warlord who's running the country, and they're like, "This is their general or commanders like, this is easy, man. We think we'll be there for like half an hour. Just fly the choppers in, get the Humvees in. We'll pick these guys up, and then we'll be out of there in no time. Like this is an in and out situation that turns into like an 18-hour
Is it
ordeal.
Ewan McGregor's character? There's like such a huge emphasis on the fact that he's never really been in war, and that so he's the character that they use to introduce us to this type of combat. And I think because I'm sorry, they move around so many characters. Sometimes I can't remember which character was doing what. But he's the one that was like trying to fill his water bottle, and they're like, "You won't need," or his
Yeah, yeah.
canteen, "You won't need that." And then he's trying to fill his,
They're like,
or
you
he's
won't
trying
need
to
that. He
grab
looks
like
at the
night
night
vision
vision
goggles.
goggles. We'll be out before it's night. And then that one
The one
guy's like
guy's like taking out
taking the
his
armor. Yeah, he's taking the plates out
removing
of
his
his vest from the back specifically, which he gets like shot in the back later. He's like, I don't plan on getting shot in the back running away. Like, so yeah, they have that heavy like foreshadowing of all of those things being a problem. Uh,
Yeah, I think my favorite shot is the guy that gets pinned down and he's like ends up in a classroom or something, or at least a room with a woman and a lot of little kids. And when he tries to go out the back door, he slips. I always love this in war movies where it's like the clumsiness saves them. And there's like a kid and a father because the soldier slips. The kid ends up killing his father, unloading a clip into his father instead of shooting soldier. And I was just like, yeah, that's like the ideal war movie. Like, how did you survive? Were you real heroic? No, I slipped and I fell on my ass, and it saved my life. And then he was a real hero because he didn't kill the child. He was just like, I
yeah,
left.
yeah, yeah. They think they're gonna go in there. That it's gonna be easy. Yeah, Ewan McGregor's a great character too because you definitely get the when he's talking about how he sits in the office all day typing, which he first tells Orlando Bloom when the guy's like, "What's the combat like?" And he's like, "I don't see combat. I got skills." He's like, "What, typing?" And he's like, "Well, can you type?" No. He's like, "Exactly. So I get to sit in my
But that's not
office."
a skill. That's not a
his,
special
his
skill.
his secret skill is coffee making.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely know that even though he's like saying he keeps talking about like, yeah, oh, just make coffee. I made coffee through Desert Storm. I made coffee here. Well, I never get to go out. And then that guy with the broken hand's like, well, guess it's your lucky day. And he's like, what? Yeah, you're taking my place. He's like, oh, oh, great. Like, absolutely did not want that, but he has to pretend like he's always wanted to be in the war.
Yeah, there's a lot of great scenes. Like they go against what normally happens. Like the one where the guy got back and his commander's like, "We're gonna go out again." He's like, "We're going back out in that?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're gonna go, right?" And then they have this like real dramatic like moment where he gets in the Humvee. The commander does, and the other guy doesn't. And he's just like has disappointment on his face, and they start to take off. But then the guy run like he feels bad or something, so he runs to get into the last Humvee to join them.
Yeah.
It just plays
That,
against the type of like, yeah, you would think like either he's a coward or he's not. And Ridley Scott's like he's a coward, but he's gonna do it anyways.
yeah. Can't let everyone else go out by themselves.
This movie is a lot more violent than Thin Red Line. We get a little bit of
Yeah.
the other side, but it's not as comforting.
A lot of people getting blown up. That one guy just straight up takes an RPG to the side and it's just in him. And they're like, that's unexploded ordnance.
I honestly thought that that was just gonna like blow up when they were like taking the body out or something.
But yeah.
Like it was like when it impaled the man. I didn't even look them up. I probably should have looked them up, but I didn't care. But apparently, this movie has like a lot of inconsistencies with like what actually went down there. But I feel like Ridley Scott is Hitchcock in the sense that he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have no idea what the differences are. I do like that this movie, every character writes their name in marker on their helmet, so like it helps you keep straight who some of these characters are. I don't say they all look the same, but they're very similar for a lot of them, and especially when they're covered in blood, because then you're just like,
Yeah.
it's just a face covered in blood. Like you're looking at some shapes, like, wait a minute, that's the what's that guy's name? Kim, the guy from Sons of Anarchy, when he was
Yeah.
like, he's like blowed up, and I'm like, who is that? I'm like trying real hard to tell. I'm like, oh wait, I think
You
he's
almost
that
gotta like
guy.
wait till they yeah, you almost gotta wait till they talk or something like that to get the voice to realize who it is.
Showed
Yeah,
him in an angle that you never see him in.
yeah. He's also, I guess, like maybe he has like some foreshadowing too when like that scene where like you said Ewan McGregor's trying to get the night vision goggles in the water and they're like you don't need stuff like that and he tapes like his blood type to his leg or something like that in case he gets
Yeah,
shot, but then his entire lower body gets blown off by a grenade or a rocket.
yeah. They say it's bad luck, but Delta Team does it anyways.
Yeah, might be a little bad luck. Just a bit there. I do love
Yeah,
to with I think some of the best or not even the best, but there is a little bit of kind of I guess a little comic relief with Tom Hardy and Ewan Bremer together when they get left behind.
yeah.
Which
I'll say that
yeah,
there was too because I was laughing at some of those exchanges.
the two of them are kind of funny together when they're like everyone's like, okay, we're gonna go. You meet up with the convoy, and they're like, okay, and then it just gets to the point where they're just both sitting there. There's not even any enemies near them anymore, and it's like, I don't think that convoy's coming back. It's like, were we supposed to go to the convoy, or were they coming to us? It's like, I think we were supposed to go to the convoy. Ah, fuck. What do
Let's
we
just
do
go back to
now?
the crash site.
Yeah, let's just go to the crash site, I guess. And then when he gives him that, hey, don't fire that thing too close to my head. I can't hear very well. And then he just shoots it right in front of his face.
In all honesty, he had to, but yeah, then you get to the point where
Yeah.
he's like, "Which
What's
way do
his
you want to
problem? He's
go?"
deaf.
Yeah, he's totally deaf. So he's like pointing this way and that way, and then the guy starts like screaming, and he's like, "Will you shut the fuck up?" Screaming. We don't want to draw attention to us. Or that scene where he's like, "What? What did you say?" I didn't say anything.
Yeah. You're gonna cover me, right? You're not just gonna run in. You gotta cover me. He's like, yeah. Don't forget. What? I said, don't forget. You need to cover me.
I like when they shoot at the other guy, and then I can't remember which character it is, but they're like, "That's so and so," and then he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit."
Yeah. Come to us. Fuck you. Come to me.
It is funny because like the comedy, there is a little bit of comedy in there where he's like, "You almost killed him," and then because he can't hear, he's just like, "Shit, I almost killed him." So this is definitely one of the movies that the plot or the story of this movie is just depicted in the events that take place. And since it's the ensemble cast, it definitely feels more like, I want to say like Risk or something, but it's like a strategic game. Like the story is way bigger than any of the individual characters.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
You know what I
very
mean?
they're very much separated. They don't know nobody knows what the other people are doing at the time. There's like I said, this mission was very much poorly planned out, I guess. Or yeah, like I said, they overestimated that their forces could just go in and do this no problem, that they wouldn't meet as much resistance as they did. And then yeah, having the two Blackhawks go down, which just turns it into, instead of just being a simple capture mission, turns the whole thing into a rescue mission that makes it that much more difficult. This is definitely, I know like you brought up that, yeah, I read too that the movie has inaccuracies. As far as I could tell, I couldn't find like a thing that specifically said a particular thing that was like, I think as it's depicted in the movie, like the events are pretty much what happened the way they happened, except it's a lot of the complaints were that they like downplayed that actually the Pakistanis, and I think they said the Malaysian army was like way more involved in helping. Like this depicts it basically just being these American Rangers by themselves with no help whatsoever. And that's what I read, that it was actually they had a lot of outside help from other places, which that feels like a very American thing, because that was the
Mm.
complaint about the movie Argo, was actually the Canadians did a lot of the work in this. It wasn't mostly the CIA. It was a lot of other people that made this happen. The CIA was just also kind of there helping.
And Ridley Scott addresses this somewhat. I don't know if it's as defining as a moment as he makes it out to be, because the opening is telling us that there's famine and all this stuff from essentially the civil war that's starting there. We get a little bit throughout. We actually don't. It's more experience than it is plot, but like you do get moments when they're like, what do you think you're doing here? This isn't even your war. At the end, you kind of have Josh Hartnett's thing where he's saying, "Do I think that I'm a hero? No." But I mean, at the same time, I feel like the average person would have probably went back and been like, "Yeah, I'm a hero. I had no reason to be there. We didn't really accomplish anything, but I'm a hero."
Yeah, I know the other thing, and it's like still there somewhat in the movie, but it doesn't. He doesn't make like a big point of it. I think the other big things that they were criticized for being like inaccurate was that the Americans, they were like, there were definitely a lot of, like, you see it a little bit here and there, but they were like, there were definitely a lot of women and children that got killed in the middle of this, like in the middle of this fight, because there was a lot of shooting where it was just they're just shooting into a crowd because one guy has a gun, and they're like the American soldiers and the other like allied forces definitely killed a lot of women and
I
children
mean,
there
they don't
in
really
like in
show
the
it in
crossfire.
detail.
But yeah, you
Sorry, they
you
don't
see
show it
like
in.
once.
Well, I was gonna say the scenes where they're in the Humvees and they're basically trapped and they can't get out, and you have somebody that's on the machine gun, and they're just shooting like indiscriminately into
Yeah,
buildings and stuff. So Ridley Scott could have had more shots of people like kids or something getting blown up inside
yeah.
those
We
things.
only really get you get that one the one scene where that woman runs up and picks up the gun off the body, and there's a guy that's like, "Don't do it, don't do it," and then the
Yeah,
other guy
get that
shoots
like
her.
generic war scene. Don't touch it.
Yeah, and then like you see like there's that one. It's very close to the end when the Humvees are driving through, and there's that guy that's carrying a dead kid, and he walks in front of one of the Humvees, and it's like that's like the only real moments we get. That's like, oh yeah, definitely a lot of civilians probably got murdered in the middle of all this when all this happened. So I know they said they toned that down, and I think they also toned down how much they wanted to say that it was like the American Army's bad intelligence that led to all these people getting killed unnecessarily. Like they kind of almost seem like they do just chalk it up to, ah man, if that one guy with the rocket launcher hadn't been there. And it's like, well, you probably should have known not to not to try to do this operation. Like Tom Sizemore says all those things at the beginning when the two commanding officers ask him, "What's your problem?" And he's like, "Oh, what's the problem? I don't know. Going in the middle of the broad daylight in the middle of a busy market where everybody will see what we're doing, like on 2 hours notice. Like, oh, what's not to like? It seems great." And they're like, "Oh, I think it'll be fine." He's like, "Oh, it's easy for you to say. You'll be in the chopper flying around overhead. Like you're not going to be the one sitting on the ground in the middle of all of it. That's real easy to say. Oh, I don't think it'll be a problem."
Also, too, like when they go in the first time, is like immediately brought up. They're like, "Why are they burning tires?" They're signaling that we're coming. So like,
Yeah,
that little kid sees them and stuff. So it's just like they know they've been tipped off so early. There's no
yeah.
sneaking in.
It's before, yeah, before they even get there.
There's a scene in the beginning that I thought was really funny to me where they capture like I guess he's the guy that's supplying the ammunition and shit. Whoever they capture in the beginning, but it's Eric Bana that's following him, and I'm like, he sticks out very
Sticks out
badly.
so
Like
much.
I don't see how he would be the person following that guy. Like, yeah, he didn't look like
He's got
anyone
the
else
Oakley
around.
Oakley shades on.
Yeah, I didn't even know
I mean,
he
he's
had those
white.
Oakley shades in '93. So maybe that's one of the inconsistencies.
Yeah,
But
yeah, maybe that's a little anachronistic there, but yeah, yeah, and I love when they're trying to. It's great when you see those moments of the disconnect between everybody because everything has to keep getting relayed further and further back. Like they're trying to lead the convoy out with the prisoners, and he's like, "Oh, you need to take that left," and he's like, "Well, you need to tell me before I get to the turn. I can't make the left when you tell me." And the guy's like, "Well, you have to drive slower. It takes a while for us to get the data." And he's like, "I can't drive slower. I'm being shot at. Like, I don't think you understand. Like, we're in an
hmm
active war zone. I can't slow down." And then when he gets that point when it's like, "Oh, you're gonna have to turn around," and he's like, I can't turn around. What are you talking about?" And they're like,
or that
"Oh,
scene towards
there's
the
no other
end where
way."
Ewan McGregor's Grimes, it's like go, 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 and the driver's like, "Don't tell me to go. I don't go until I have the command to go." And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, yeah. Or they try to like lead. They're trying to get like another convoy back in with that Eric Bana rejoins, and they're like, "Okay, you need to just turn at any one of these intersections." Like, I don't think you understand. There's roadblocks. Like they have every street blocked. You literally can't get into the city. And they're like, "I mean, you might have
I,
to drive completely around the city." And they're like, "That's not an option."
I think it's like the precursor for like the Call of Duty Modern Warfare games because
I've said the same thing when I watch this movie. Is it very much feels like if you were to watch the campaign for some of those, like yeah, like the original Modern Warfare or something like that.
I mean, Call of Duty was happening at before or after this time.
I think they were still on World War II by with those early games
Yeah,
though.
by the time the Modern Warfare came out, I feel like it does feel a lot like it in the sense that besides like the shots of like basically all the shots being like exactly the same of we're gonna do slow motion as a rockets coming towards you and things are getting destroyed and falling around you or people are blowing up around you, but it also does have that chaos of everybody's doing their own thing and like yeah, some of them aren't working as a team. But so you said this is your favorite war film.
It's up there.
For me, I have some issues with it, but I don't think they're issues that are with the movie itself. I don't think the movie does anything wrong. I think I connect less without having like a main character to follow.
Yeah, you get a little bit less. I think that is the difference between like this and the Thin Red Line. Even though that's an ensemble cast, it definitely has a. Like I said, it definitely has a smaller ensemble cast that you can at least really kind of focus in. And Malik
It
does
breathes too.
give you
This does
those.
not. This
Yeah,
is like
Malik gives you those moments, which I think is also the difference in the type of conflict it is. It's like there's so much happening. It's such a this movie almost feels like it's in real time, even though it isn't. It takes place over like 15 or 16 hours, but it has that urgency that just keeps moving forward. That it feels like everything's just happening all at once, and that it's so there's not necessarily those moments to really do what Malik did. Like in that film, they have breaks. It's like, okay, well, now we're out of the conflict for a week. So now everyone can reflect on what's happened. This is more everyone's just in the fight and there's no time to stop and have a character like Josh Hartnett just go into a monologue about, man, war is crazy. Like at most you get like I think you get like
that you're
kind
making
of a
me
little
think
bit
of
from
like one
Eric
of those
Bana
like
at the end.
one of those like SNL skits where they're doing like the art class like theater thing. I could see
Oh,
them having war and then they
I
like
thought you, I
freeze
thought you were
frame and it
gonna
gets
I thought you were gonna bring up. I know what you're talking about. I thought you were gonna bring up. They've done it a couple times. With the which this was I was thinking of this during Thin Red Line of like the wife that's writing the letter to her husband in
yeah.
like the Civil War, and He's like, I
Yeah,
hang out with Chauncey now, and he's like, who is Chauncey? What? It's like, oh, he's my servant or something like that. And he's like, when did we start getting those? Like, what's going on at home?
I would just like, yeah, it just freeze frames. Josh Hartnett walks out, and he's like, "War is not cool." And it just
Yeah,
starts going
yeah,
on some monologue before going back.
yeah. This is definitely a war movie where it's very much it is the war or the conflict itself is the focus. There's not really we pretty much learn nothing about any of these characters as people really because the movie just doesn't have time to give you any of their background on who they are or what they do if they have a family, if they have a wife or kids. It's just everything's so tight. Yeah, it's one where the conflict is that's almost the main character is the battle itself. All the everyone else is just in there to fill places
Yeah, and props to the Somalians because they were fighting in dress clothes most of the time.
in
They didn't
silk
have
silk
helmets.
button down shirts.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
just hope they like if any of them survive, it's just because they got lucky that nobody shot.
yeah,
I feel like this movie is also it caters to an audience that doesn't has never seen combat before. But I don't think that even though that there's a lot of like exposition in like what's happening, like you said, when they're not giving too much of backstory, he only brings up backstory when it's necessary or there's some like comic relief to it or something. You don't really get to see more than that of like who these people are. The main character in this, Josh Hartnett, you don't really know anything of him outside of this situation.
yeah,
Is there something that I didn't pick up on? Like I don't know where he's from. I don't know. I don't know what his life is or why he was there. Like the only thing they do is like when he's going back home, he doesn't feel like a hero. But I don't even know where his home is besides America. Like I
America.
know,
Yeah,
and I get that.
America is his home. No need any specifics there. It's just America.
Is this your favorite Ridley Scott movie?
No, I'd probably still say Alien. It's probably my
Yeah.
favorite Ridley Scott movie. But I think it's good. Like I said, we kind of talked about that last time. I don't even really think Ridley Scott has, not that I can really think of a bad movie. He has movies that I don't think like aren't as good as other ones that he's done in the past. Like I don't think Prometheus is on the same quality level as the original Alien, but I don't think that movie's bad. I just think it's like if I was to watch those movies side by side, I'd be like, oh, well, Alien's definitely obviously the superior movie of those two, but
Or like one of my favorite ones is examples would be Hannibal because Hannibal's like
yeah,
nowhere near the
Silence
level
of the
of
Lambs.
craft as Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah,
but he does and he gives Anthony Hopkins more screen time because that's what happens when they were doing the sequel and then when they remade Red Dragon, they're like we got to use so much Anthony Hopkins and it's like
yeah,
I don't know, like he's great, but Les Hopkins seems to be better. I mean, he does have the great scene with Ray Liotta eating his own brain. So,
it is. I feel like that's a scene everyone always remembers from that movie. 'Cause it's like it's so ridiculous.
I mean, I would mostly say, I think most of his movies kind of just, I don't know. He's the last couple of years, he's really been churning them out. Like he just, it's so many movies, and he is like a scatterbrain. He saw something recently where he said that he doesn't think that if Tarantino is anything like him, then he's not going to be able to stop making movies after his next movie. Because Ridley Scott's going through something where he's just
Yeah,
he's like, I'm about to die.
he is. Yeah,
I
and
need to
like you
create
said,
as many movies as I
he
can.
is all over the place with like he goes from what was the last duel or whatever with like he goes
Adam Driver,
historical
Matt
there,
Damon.
and then he goes the House of Gucci, and you're like okay, and then he's like Napoleon, and by the way, I'm gonna make a 4 hour cut of that, and then out of nowhere he's like fuck it, Gladiator 2. Just seemingly the movie that I don't think anybody was ever sitting there and was like, you know what I want? A sequel to Gladiator, like the movie that
That's
seemed
been
like it
talked
just
about for like 20 years, and people were
I
like, I
know.
don't see how you would do a sequel. And he's like, I have an
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
mean he's making it happen, I guess. So
but
we
then like
still
there's a
still
lot
have
of
to see that
movies
quality.
where you get the sequels like Alien and Blade Runner and all that kind of stuff. I think it's funny because it's like he had a choice between Blade Runner or Alien, and he basically took over Alien after there became more interest in doing more sequels.
Yeah.
So then he does Prometheus, he decides not to direct Blade Runner 2049, and then he's like, "Oh man, I should have made Blade Runner 2049." But I mean, it would not have been the same movie because Villeneuve, he's a completely different person. You wouldn't have those like long takes probably of Ryan Gosling like walking through Las Vegas and shit
Just
like
walking
that.
around being depressed.
Yeah, like it takes its time. It's kind of nice. I like that. I don't really can't really think of a Ridley Scott movie that wants to take its time. This particularly does not want to take its time. It's like full on crazy, and I do think it's necessary for like an experience movie. But like you said when we were talking about the surround sound, which the surround sound did sound really great in this,
Yeah.
I feel like most horror movies that's how it's gonna be. They're pinned down, constant gunfire, can't get out. It makes sense, but also it's like, if you ever watch these superhero movies and stuff where they're like, there's a fight between this and that, and it's 30 minutes long, and when you watch it, you're like, that was way too long of a fight.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this feels like, where we were talking about not having enough like down moments. Like I think one of the best moments in this movie is when they're flying in for the first time because it feels tense. It feels a lot like Villeneuve's Sicario. Not as tense, but
Yeah.
it has that extreme like tension feel as they're like flying through the smog and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much from that first rocket fire on, it's almost nonstop gunfire. I do wish, and this is my insanity here, he could have pulled the greatest title card of all time, threw it up when the Black Hawk went
When
down.
the guy goes, "We got a Black Hawk down."
Yeah. Or actually, I wouldn't even have him say, he should have said, we have a, and they should just cut the black and say Black Hawk down. But that was like almost at the hour mark. And I
Well,
think that
that's
would be the
pretty
most,
deep into the film, yeah.
yeah, that'd be like the most impressive title card
Yeah.
weight, I guess.
Yeah, that no one's expecting.
Yeah. They forgot that the title card never happened. But yeah,
Yeah.
there were some people too. Like I saw, and we brought up Hannibal, maybe that's why. But that Hugh Dancy's in this,
Oh yeah.
and I don't even know what
Yeah.
character he was. I just saw his name at at the end, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
I think he
I
was
don't even
another one
know.
that probably had like a shaved head and like just didn't look like I've seen him in something like Hannibal that I just didn't even register. I knew his name was in the credits, but I did not even I got to the end and was like, yeah, which character was he in that movie? Like
Now,
you have
another thing
yeah.
I was to say, another thing with this movie was there's that scene where the guy got hit. Instead of femoral artery, they're like femoral artery, and I'm like, is that how it's said? Like, who's wrong? Is it me or is it them? I've never heard it called the femoral artery. I'm like, it didn't sound like an accent. It just sounded like you didn't know how to say it.
Just one of those words he's read for the first time and is just like, I'll just say it how it looks like it's written.
Yeah, I hope it's like that scene from Hail Caesar. Femoral, femoral, fa, fa. Sorry, what were you saying? Do you even remember?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. There's so many, again, well, like we said before, there's so many random people that just show up in this movie. One of the medics is the dad from Modern Family, is just randomly there, and it's just like you turn around, Jeremy Piven's one of the pilots. It's just like
I
every
remembered he
time you
was in
turn
this.
around.
He was a great moment too, where he's. I swear you see this guy dead more than alive. Like,
I thought about that too after I was watching the movie. I feel like there's so many shots of just his body laying there in this movie. Yeah, more so than even scenes of him when he was alive. He had more
they're like an
dead
hour
screen
goes
time.
by and they get back to the Black Hawk and they can keep
They'll
showing his
show
dead
him
body.
again. Yeah, they have to remind you the pilots are already dead.
He's really good at playing dead too.
Yeah, that is. Yeah,
Yeah,
you almost need to look that up and see, like, does he technically have more screen time as a corpse than he did as a living person in this film? Get a stopwatch and check the times there.
this movie too. There's been times where like so much time goes by, and then they'd go back to like one of the more main characters, like Josh Hartnett, and it's like I forgot Josh Hartnett was in this movie for a second because we were like so far into all these other characters.
Yeah, once you follow, yeah, and then I think you start to get a little confused on who's what, like the who's in whose unit. They keep getting mixed up like that because it's a joint unit. There's like the Marine, Delta Force, and Army Rangers. And they're both working together, but it starts to get muddled at points to be like, are those guys the Army Rangers? Wait, which ones are the Deltas? Like who's with who? And then yeah, I think Ewan McGregor's with. I think he's originally with Josh Hartnett's group, and then he somehow gets separated from them, and then he's following around Jason Isaac's group after that, and then they split off from each other. like, like,
They
is he
send
even
him
with his
back.
original
That's
group?
funny. Where he's like, you're not in this squad. Nope. He's like, all right, well, you'll go back. And he's like, oh shit.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's just all over the place in this movie. Sometimes they all get lost at some point.
Or like my brain, maybe I have issues, but it'd be like
Yeah,
Eric Bana's there, and I'm like, how the fuck did he get there? And I'm like, oh yeah, he separated and he went in on foot. It's weird because there's a lot of scenes where essentially, the Black Hawk goes down. They're trying to set up a perimeter. They can't move. They're basically trapped. They're gonna send people in to help them. Help. It's hard for them to get help there, but even with that, there are people that seem to show up and go regardless. Like they'll be there, and I'm like, how the fuck that person get in? It's taken everyone else like hours to get there, and they're not the help, but they somehow found their way over there. I was telling Chuck beforehand, I watched the extended cut. I don't know. I saw it was 8 minutes of new material. So it was still the 2.5 hour movie. I couldn't tell you what it was. I joked with Chuck and I said maybe it was that they added a second Black Hawk going down because I can't remember the first movie at all. That's a good scene though, too, where they shoot it and they're like, I think I'm good. He's not.
yeah. He's like, you want to check those readings again? I'm getting a lot of movement in these pedals here. And the back
He's
rotor
like,
just
we're
completely
good. We're
blows
good.
off. He's like, nope, nope, we're going down.
I don't know if it's for the movie or if it's how it actually was too, but for them knowing that they have rocket launchers, those helicopters were extremely low to the city, to the buildings and stuff. Like that when the second copter goes down, Super 6-4, another one shows up and it's already like, it's just as low. And I'm like, I don't know, are they trying to lose all their Black Hawks today?
Yeah. Well, they just weren't like we said, they didn't plan ahead there. I don't know. Yeah, very much was I don't know, they thought that they couldn't get that organized that fast, or I guess underestimated the fact that they had that much firepower at their disposal.
Yeah, and this movie is very much about miscommunication because everything, like even early on before they get into anything, it's like, here's Blackburn for you. He's not my guy.
Yeah,
Will
he's in
you
the
watch
other
him
group.
anyways? Sure.
Yeah.
And then whenever they're in the Black Hawk, they like try to maneuver to avoid the rocket, and Blackburn falls. When they're on the ground, they send the medic over, and the medic's like, "Where was he shot?" And they're like, "He wasn't shot. He fell." It's like this is
The guy's like, how
already,
does that happen?
yeah. But
Yeah,
they don't they
the
don't leave him. No man behind. Like yeah, you get those scenes where it's like the person's dead, and they're like, "Medic." The medic's like, "I
yeah.
can't save this person."
That's what they when they get to that one crash site and they had to pull him out. And I think he's like they're like cutting into it with the jaws of life and saws and stuff. And he's like, how much longer is it going to take for you to get those guys out? And they're like, I mean, they got to cut the whole cockpit out around the bodies, like because they're so buried in the ground from the crash. And the guy's like, well, we can't leave them behind. And then it does kind of like a jump cut from I think it was at like 2 o'clock in the morning to 5:45 in the morning when they finally get them out of there. So they were sitting there for 3 hours, like just trying to get them out of that cockpit of the helicopter.
A lot of dogs in this movie too.
I
There's
know
one dog
there's
that
so many
almost
times
gets
where I'm
run
like
it.
I'm like how did they not like run over dogs with those Humvees? Because you'll see shots of like the Humvee flying down the street and a dog like barely running out in front of it or something like that. I'm like I'm almost did they provide dogs or were there just random loose dogs all over the city when they shot the movie and they're like, well, the dogs are just there.
And it also makes me think like obviously there's a lot of practical, there's a lot of, they're actually on a set and everything. And there is a lot of CG, but I don't see the CG that doesn't look all that great being as good as like they CG'd the dog to run in front in
Yeah,
front of the Humvee.
yeah. Like I think
Like
there were
cuz some
just
of the
random
CG,
loose dogs everywhere.
yeah, well they're going into that town in the beginning. Well, not the beginning, but after the Blackhawks have already went down, there's like that smoke effect that doesn't look very good.
Yeah.
There's that scene when Josh Hartnett rappels down to see if what happened to Orlando Bloom if he's still alive. They have all the dust going around them, and it doesn't look that great. So like when I see that dog running in front of the Humvee, I'm like, I don't. That looks too good for it to be a special effect. Or maybe it's just one that they somehow pulled it off. I don't know. There's a donkey. It's a real donkey, but I don't think the donkey sees any combat. It's just in a moment where they're afraid they're gonna get shot. And I think very much most of these movies launch someone's career. Eric Bana ended up as Bruce Banner in The Hulk with Nick Nolte from The Thin Red Line.
Hey, Tim Blake Nelson was in a Hulk movie too.
Tim Blake Nelson went from Thin Red Line to Hulk. There's poodles that Nick Nolte has, so they're probably from Black Hawk Down.
That's almost the way. Yeah, track everyone's movements to the whatever franchise they went on to. I mean, you got even from this movie, you've got Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jason Isaacs, Lucius Malfoy. Like you've got all these guys that were in this movie that all are in these huge franchises later on in their careers.
Oh, that one guy too. I don't know the actor, but he was the guy from Fantastic Four, the one that plays Reed Richards.
Oh yeah. He's another one that I like. I forget because he's another one that goes out of the movie so early. Like when he's which again another like weird scene of he's like, oh, I love this part, and he's watching The Jerk with Steve Martin, and then just all of a sudden just falls on the floor, and they're like, he's having a seizure. I'm like, did Steve Martin give him a seizure? What happened? They're like he's epileptic. I'm like, how did he get this far into the army before they figured out he was epileptic? Like,
I mean, that shit happens.
I guess.
Well, I don't think they're like the best physicians that are like, his heart's beating. He's good.
I almost feel like it's not even that he got in the army, but like, how did he make it this far into life? Like, how did he make 20 years without anyone knowing he's epileptic? Like, you'd think the signs would have showed up at some point earlier on that they would know something like that.
Well, no, he got lucky.
Yeah.
He's avoided it. Flashing lights somehow.
That's how he moved. That's how he got out of there. He's not sticking around in that war.
Yeah, that means some of the characters are.
That's our other odd Marvel cameo from Thin Red Line that we didn't even bring up is Thomas Jane just randomly. He's an injured soldier that's like, I'm going home, and like Jim Caviezel just randomly runs into him like sitting in a field somewhere, and he's like, are you good? And he's like, I'm just waiting for the next truck to come through, and he's like, are you sure you don't want help? And he's like, I'm good. It's like,
I'll
okay,
let him
buddy.
know. And this is why he is Christ-like in that, because he does let them know. They're like, there's a guy out there. You better go get him.
Yeah, there's a wounded guy. I think he needs to go home.
They feel like small parts, but when the movie's so long, some of these characters are probably getting like 10, 15 minutes of screen time, which is more than they'd have gotten in any other movie.
Yeah.
The only woman in this movie, we talk about the Bechdel test if it passed. None of these movies will pass that.
No.
The one scene where the guy's calling his wife and she misses the call, I'm like, she didn't even talk to anybody.
Yeah.
It's not even like she did talk to another woman or a guy. She didn't talk to a single person.
Yeah. At least in Thin Red Line, she wrote a whole letter that we got to have.
She had a voice.
Yeah, she always had a voice. There was dialogue for that character for at least one scene. I do like this movie. Like I said, it's up there in my favorite war movies. There's different. I know you mentioned like Apocalypse Now. I think Apocalypse Now is another one that's closer to Thin Red Line in terms of it's not about just a specific battle or war. It's very much more character than war itself. This falls more into the war is the character pretty much. That's the sole focus, and it's just how all these individuals played a part in that overall battle.
Right. And the biggest difference when we get into next week's All Quiet on the Western Front, there's one very primary character in that movie.
Yeah.
So
no more ensemble.
No more ensemble.
One character.
Not even a well-known cast. They're all German, I think.
Yeah.
So, and I do need to see the director did that Conclave with Ray Fiennes, so that looks pretty good. But that's already American, so he's already jumped into. I'm assuming he's German. It'd be maybe he's not. So. Maybe he just made an all German.
European in general.
Yeah.
Some European.
What are your least favorite war films?
To bring it to another Josh Hartnett movie, unfortunately. I mean, Pearl Harbor's not a great movie. It's not one of Michael Bay's best, or it's not anyone's best. It's not Ben Affleck's best movie. It's all around not a great film. I think there's definitely been better versions of that
It
story.
should have been way better than it was.
Yeah, there's just something about that movie that doesn't work that well. That I feel like is the one that stands out more. There's probably other war movies that I've seen that I was like, okay, yeah, that was like a generic war movie or something like that. But
More forgettable than terrible. Like, it was
yeah,
decent, but I don't remember anything from it.
but like Pearl Harbor, I distinctly remember stuff in that movie that's just like that just wasn't good. And I think we brought up last time too, like Josh Hartnett, I think sometimes I don't think he's a bad actor. I think that's definitely a case of he just happened to be in a bad movie because the same I think Ben Affleck's good in a lot of movies. He's not good in that movie because Michael Bay is just not always the best at directing people. He's better at the spectacle of
Heavy
war. I don't
CG
think he's
too. So like, if you can't, like, an actor can only work off so much if they don't have any, they don't know what the hell
yeah.
they're doing. There's like some tropes. There's even some things that bother me in this. Like, I think the slow mo for drama, for like melodrama, that always bothers me. It's just like it gets to be too much sometimes. Like, what are you trying to show? And if you're just trying to like extend the scene to like convey an emotion, I think sometimes it doesn't work. And there's a lot of times in Black Hawk Down where like there's a moment like that where it just does not work to be slow down all the way to show some gunfire. And I think there's a scene with one of the Blackhawks are flying over Josh Harnett, and it has some slow mo, and I might be confusing the scenes, but that's when the bullets fall on him and he's getting burnt by the
Oh
bullets. But
yeah.
it's like we could tell he's getting burnt by the bullets. You didn't really have to like slow the helicopter down to show us this. But I mean, there's tons of movies where it has that slowed down scene that works, and then sometimes I'm like, this movie, like, it would just be like, I mean, it won editing, I think, so I'm probably in the minority with saying anything bad about the editing in this. But I'd honestly would say this movie has great editing overall, just because the way that it ties all the scenes together, and you always understand what's happening. If you don't understand where they're at, there's a character that will tell you. So that bothers me a little bit. But like we were saying, how this reminds us of Call of Duty, this did take us in a different way for how we're seeing war films, like the perspective of the war films, where it has that gritty, we're in the action type shots. I think the movie looks pretty good, minus some bad CG here and there. But that's like, when you think of the 2.5 hour movie, it's probably 5 minutes tops of questionable
Yeah.
CG. The rest of it looks really good. All the practical effects with, I know, the people getting like injured or totally blown up look very good.
Yeah, but I'll even give like I'm sure at the time when this was released, that CG probably looked fine. Like no one probably even noticed. Like I almost feel like
No, they
I'll
probably
I'll
like,
I'll
whoa,
100%
look how good that looks.
criticize new movies that come out that have CGI that looks just as bad, if not worse, than what the CGI Black Hawk Down does. And it's like these movies came out 20 years later. How do they still look? How are they looking worse?
Well, they always bring up the Orlando Bloom movie, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest,
Yeah.
where they have Davy Jones. How good that looks, and how there's still movies that, like, big movies that come out, and the CG doesn't look that good, and they've basically
I still keep thinking
the
of
people.
people keep bringing up like Thor Ragnarok as like the one like that kid's head in the cloud or something. They're like, this movie came out in
That's
2022
Love and
and they
Thunder.
or yeah, Love and Thunder. Sorry, I was getting my Thors mixed up there. But this movie came out like 2 years ago, and this is the CGI they used to show this kid. Like, how are we at this point?
Well, it's been explained. It's like when they did that Pirates of the Caribbean character, they put in the time and effort to make it look right, to make it look real. They can do that in today's world, but they're not focused on it looking real as much as it being good enough that the audience is going to know what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
When they're really CG heavy, they start giving them off to a bunch of different companies. So like another reason some of these Marvel movies only take like a year to come out is because they've got so many people working. Like there'll be one, like I knew a person that was working on the Pokemon Detective Pikachu movie, and all they did was animate the Bulbasaur's walking, and I think it was like months. It was like not even a significant moment in the overall movie. So that's why I think it looks bad. It's like we have a
Well,
time crunch. We already
the
said when
last
this
time
movie's.
the last time you had that company that won best visual
Oh,
effects for Life of Pi, like as they're going out of business, it was like, well, that's what bankrupted them. Apparently, was making really good, very lifelike special effects. There you go. That's apparently the cost of having good CGI today. Is it's going to bankrupt the company that made it.
yeah, we're like James Cameron's avatars. They're gonna just get better and more realistic. Like even the first one doesn't look bad, but the second one looks amazing for CG characters, and it's only gonna get better. Like because that's what his focus is on.
Yeah.
And I think that would be cool to be like these effects. They have to fucking look great if it's gonna be a main character. Like if we're gonna be looking at this person's face the whole time, they can't look like what was that Ant-Man where they had
Modoc.
yeah, like I get that it's supposed to be kind of funny, but like it looked
It
like
just looks like
something.
garbage. It looks like you made it in Photoshop in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it does. It looks like Photoshop in 5 minutes. Like they just stretched the face over though, and that was that. But you know what? Good for that actor getting that paycheck for just being a face.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't mean the harp on this movie. I say the CG didn't age well. I definitely think at the time everybody was probably blown away by it.
Yeah.
Maybe not enough for it to get visual effects, but impressed nonetheless. And honestly, I'd say most of this movie like isn't CG. So there are a lot of practical effects. And I think what happens is when we kind of move into these modern movies that are mostly CG, then it really makes the whole movie overall kind of looks bad. Unless you're something like Sharknado where you're like, we're gonna have fun, but like our effects probably look just as good as any other movie, and we're just gonna be bad and have fun with it. This movie definitely set off some careers. That Ridley Scott, he really took off after this movie. Is this 2001, right?
Yeah.
I think that's when Hannibal came out too. So you literally had those two movies come
Yeah.
out at the
It
same
had to have
time.
been. It was right around the same time. I don't know which one was the first. Maybe Hannibal.
Because then he did Body of Lies, right? That's Ridley Scott,
Yeah.
and that's kind of similar to this type of movie, but more like espionage.
Yeah. Then All Out War.
I don't really want to call it espionage, but yeah, it's closer to espionage than yeah. Like, what is the and this another thing that kind of like we think of this as the modern war, but it's already 30 years old. Like this happened 30 years ago. I'm trying to think of movies that took place sooner, and I think of like Zero Dark 30, which takes us to like 2012, and that type of
Yeah.
warfare is like most of what we're seeing is like I don't want to say people behind desks and stuff. That, there's not really that, but they don't have that. Like I don't want to say it's generic, but in this movie, when they would show the general, and they always have to be like pointing at the board and like explaining where people are at and shit like that. Like they don't need that in this movie. They expect the audience is like, okay, the audience is following this just fine. We've already had the soldiers say where this shit where they're going.
Yeah.
But then again, like Zero Dark 30 is as far as the military goes, it's kind of only the end of the movie. I guess
Yeah.
it's war.
Yeah.
That's like this is a war film, but it's not even like not even our war.
It's not a.
I
Yeah.
don't
It's
know.
not a major. It's not a major war that we were directly involved in.
And I have it. I never watched it. It's also Michael Bay, but I didn't watch the Benghazi movie.
Oh, well, you should watch that one. It'll change your mind on some things. You might vote for somebody else after seeing that.
Oh, you think so?
Once you know the truth.
Okay. But I
That
am.
was
I'm just trying to think of like how modern of a war that we've actually have recently covered.
I mean, yeah, I guess Iraq would be the most modern. I mean, that's the most recent thing we've been or
I mean, you get
Afghanistan
like
and
kind of
Iraq
fake in
like
like Homeland or something where.
yeah, if it's something like that, yeah, more
Or wait, there was that one. There's a Jake Gyllenhaal movie that just came out where he's like, I think it's a Guy Ritchie movie. I can't remember what it's called. But it's like the Commando. I don't. I don't really remember. I'll have to find that and watch that.
yeah.
I can't remember what it's called.
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's like another Jake Gyllenhaal, like he goes in to rescue somebody. I think it's modern. I think see that's another thing with the war movies that are kind of like hard to like pinpoint when they take place, because you can have something that like this or like Iraq or something like Iraq 30 years ago and a movie that's Iraq a more recent war. They're gonna look very very similar. Uniforms are the same. A lot of the weapons, like yeah, they update the weapons, they update the helicopters and planes, and but some of that stuff they're still using the old equipment that they've had in the past. Probably the majority of war movies are World War II.
Yeah, most of them.
And then probably after that, maybe like Vietnam. You think Vietnam
Probably.
has more war movies than World War One?
Probably at this point, yeah.
I don't think we see one a lot. Like, yeah, there's Paths of Glory and 1917 and stuff like that, but I
It's
feel
because
like
no one
one
wants to make a movie where you're like they want to make the
trench
movies where
warfare.
America was like, well, yeah. First off, that doesn't make for it's always the most visually interesting thing to begin with, but it's always one of those you're only going to do like war stuff for wars that we were directly involved in more. And I know World War I we weren't as involved in as World War II or the Vietnam War or something. Or every once in a while you get the Korean War, which is just MASH. It's just MASH by itself. No one I don't I'm not aware of there ever being anything else related to the Korean War other than MASH.
I feel like we got to a point where they're like, what are the untold World War II stories? Like, we need more World War II stories that
Yeah.
people haven't talked about. Because, like, I haven't watched it in a long time, but I did like Enemy at the Gate with Jude Law and Ed Harris. They're like, we'll follow a sniper. Or you get like Fury, like, we haven't had people in tanks in a while. Let's do a tank movie.
Tank warfare.
Or you get or the closest thing you get to like a modern war is Top Gun Maverick. Like
Yeah.
it's like yeah,
Which that's
it's
practically that almost even falls into the category of yeah, basically being made up because they won't say it's always just the enemy, the target, the nemesis, the other forces. Like they never will say a country or a name. Like it's so generic to the point of again, it might as well be a fictional war they're fighting because they won't say they wanted that movie to play everywhere and people not to get offended by it. So it's like they're not the Koreans, they're not the Chinese, they're not Russians.
yeah, even like the target that they have is like it's so generic. Like the landscape is such a generic place.
Yeah, yeah, could be anywhere.
But you kind of run into that stuff too, I guess, with like the Bond movies when they get in the Cold War era, and it's like there's military, but it's just kind of generic as to who they are, what they're trying to accomplish. But the reason I was bringing up Maverick, not because I thought it's based off of a real war, but like it has probably the most modern technology for like what's actually would be happening in the war. Besides the fact, and that movie does bring up drones, they would probably use drones. They wouldn't use
Yeah.
people. But in that world, nothing's as good as Tom Cruise. So I do think that it's a good movie. I don't think I hold it as in high of regard as you do, but it's far from terrible. And I think Ridley Scott is mostly an excellent director. I mean, like, he directed the shit out of this. I think that he did a really good job with this movie. I just think some of his movies tend to stand out stronger.
Yeah.
It's not Napoleon, although Joaquin Phoenix does kind of elevate every movie. So you can put Joaquin Phoenix in a movie. Doesn't matter. It's going to be better. No Hans Zimmer next week either.
No.
I'm sorry.
Missing out there. That was our one connection.
I thought maybe they could get Hans Zimmer for it. Honestly, though, too, I think this score is better than Hans Zimmer's scores. So, not all his scores, just Thin Red Line.
Yeah,
and,
remember
and
Thin
Black
Red Line's
Hawk
a good
Down.
score. Yeah.
I feel like I went too big on the title for All Quiet on the Western Front because we did Thin Red Line, Black Hawk Down. Should have had more of a flow.
Good match up there.
And that's a World War One movie, All Quiet on the Western Front, which we're doing next week. So that's what we were talking about in Thin Red Line, where we should have done these in order of war instead of order of release. But and if you do want to watch, it's the All Quiet on the Western Front from 2 years ago, from 2022, because I'm pretty sure it's been made at least 3 times by this point.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. That's just a statistic from my head. That's not anything real. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back next week with our final war movie, and then we'll be moving into our final genre of the year because, it's fucking December. So, all right, we'll see you then.
We are Cinema d'Amore. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with news and information on upcoming episodes. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Pandora, Alexa, or iHeartRadio. It would be greatly appreciated if you subscribe to our podcast on your platform of choice. We also appreciate feedback, so rate us, review us, and let us know what you think. And above all else, thank you for listening.